when you're first starting in business, branding's the last thing you need. You don't need to invest any money in that. And what they're really saying is that a visual brand is the last thing you need. And that is true. I agree with that. For most businesses, especially for like a small service-based business, starting with one-on-one services, you don't need a brand identity. You don't need that visual brand. Like, you don't need to invest in that upfront. And so I want to kind of dispel that. That is true. However, that is only one very small piece of your brand. So what I want to kind of shift people to think about is branding is simply having a good, solid answer to the question, why would somebody choose you? And the process of getting clear on your brand so that you can answer that question with clarity and conviction is absolutely something you need to be doing right up front.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of OmarCumberbatch.com. Appreciate you, as always, joining in and learning what's new and good in the health coaching space. Today's guest is Lisa Haggis, and she was fantastic. I'm so excited to share her with you. She really broke down a whole lot of interesting things, got me thinking about all my branding situation that I'm going through right now. And I thought I had it on smash, but you know what? It's always good to hear a new perspective and always refine what you're going through in your business and evolve. And she used this word in a context during the show that you'll pick up. We are evolving as we go along. So it's really, really eye-opening for myself. I hope that you get the same message. And if you are having problems with your branding strategy, this is an awesome episode to just dive in and really get some awesome tips. She is the founder of realizeyourbrand.com, and she really is geared to just helping people build solid brand foundations to attract the right fit clients that makes your business actually get off the ground. So really interesting too, a story that she's going to share with us about just the perspective that I know a lot of us coming out of our coaching instruction, we kind of just get into that idea that we just need to get clients, and maybe that's really the first thing that we should do. But if we are able to establish our brand identity quicker, it just makes all of this stuff a lot easier. So a little bit of housekeeping, please jump on iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It helps me get guests just as awesome as Lisa, and it really helps move the show along and gets more visibility. Also, if jump on my website as well. I know that I have a sugar challenge that if you need it, it would be very beneficial for your guests. And I also have a thing on my resource page with the Health Coach Academy podcast, where you can just get all the information about why podcasting really is such a powerful component to growing a business. So let's jump into the show. Hey, Lisa, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me, Omar.
Oh, my pleasure. Very excited to share what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and just kind of what your service actually provides? I know that branding is essential to any business, and I know that you're going to provide a lot of information for health coaches. It's a tough topic, so appreciate that you're an expert in it and can give us a lot of feedback on how to get this done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, before I became like a brand specialist, I was actually in marketing for 10 years, in the corporate world, as well as in the agency space. And, that was coming straight out of school, thinking that marketing was where it was at because I wanted to be part of that creative vibe. Right. Mm-hmm. But what I started to find over and over again as a marketing person was, really two things. One, I hated how there didn't seem to be room for like a genuine way of showing up. Like, brands were just not being authentic. They were being what they thought they needed to be. And there was just this huge layer of pretense and superficial, like a superficial facade around these businesses that I was working with, and kind of related to that as they were seeking me out and asking like, hey, like, do your magic and get us out there and get us clients and, grow our audience. I didn't have much to work with because there wasn't anything interesting about them to be putting out into the world in order to pique people's interest. And so for me, that became really common to see. And these business owners didn't know better. And truthfully, as a pretty beginner in the marketing space, I didn't know better either. And so, 10 years later, after, kind of being in that space for a while and starting to see big thinkers like Seth Godin and, like the Fast Company. And like, I was just kind of digging into all of these articles about branding and what it could really look like when a company was like designed in a way right at its core that it was interesting and unique and like really kind of world changing. And then the messaging and the marketing and all of the, the communications that came after that didn't have to work so hard and didn't have to be so kind of inauthentic. And so I decided I wanted to work in that space. And in order to do so, because this was over 10 years ago now, and there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't brand strategy roles. And so I decided to go out on my own and kind of carve that unique position out for myself while kind of learning how to do it, because it wasn't what I learned in school. And so I just kind of took it one step at a time, taking what I knew about marketing, taking what I knew about business strategy, learning about personal branding, and integrating it all together to help businesses to define what it is that makes them worth talking about at their very core, so that then the marketing can be easier and authentic.
Yeah, I know that health coaches just generally coming out of their certification programs, that, the branding part is so far out there. Like it's almost, I think, something that maybe, I don't want to say it's avoided, but it's just something that I don't think that a lot of people take as one of the foundational pieces. So do you think that it's like the first thing that we really should be looking at as we just enter the space?
Absolutely. And what I'd like to point out is I think that what gets in the way often is a bit of a misunderstanding about what branding is. And because I hear a lot of advice out there, which I don't disagree with, because I know that it's being taken in a different context, but I hear this advice that like, when you're first starting in business, branding's the last thing you need. You don't need to invest any money in that. And what they're really saying is that a visual brand is the last thing you need. And that is true. I agree with that. For most businesses, especially for like a small service-based business, starting with one-on-one services, you don't need a brand identity. You don't need that visual brand. Like you don't need to invest in that upfront. And so I want to like kind of dispel that. That is true. However, that is only one very small piece of your brand. So what I want to kind of shift people to think about is branding is simply having a good, solid answer to the question, why would somebody choose you? And the process of getting clear on your brand so that you can answer that question with clarity and conviction is absolutely something you need to be doing right up front.
No, I totally agree. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because there is a big misconception about that component of branding. And I think that's why a lot of people shy away from even thinking about branding, because they're thinking of logos and like this, like you said, the visual part really has a true distinction into what you actually help us with.
Yeah, you're so right. And like the logos, like I already mentioned Seth Godin, I'm going to pull him back in here for a second, because he said something that's one of my favorite things ever about like starting with logos and design. He talks about how like that is the fun stuff. And how, as new business owners, a lot of us get caught in the trap of thinking we need that stuff and getting lost in it. But he says, do the dirty work first. And that's absolutely, I love that. So do the dirty work first of getting clear on who you are and learning to sell it and actually getting clients and serving those clients. And then later you could do that fun, beautiful visual identity as your reward for all of that hard work.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes a lot of sense. So again, when we get out of our certifications and whatnot, I think that we don't necessarily know who we actually are serving to begin with. I think what happens in health coaching institutes and schooling and stuff like that, they kind of make it really broad about who our audience is. Mm-hmm. How do you help health coaches and everybody in your client list to actually establish who they are to begin with? Because again, we want to help, we want to serve, we want to help everybody, which is very common for anybody in this field to want to do. How do we narrow that down, and how does narrowing it down help create a brand?
Yeah, well, you mentioned getting clear on who it is that you serve. And I think that is let's just start there, because that is such an important foundational piece. And something that I like to kind of point out, because you're talking about coming right out of your certification, which means you're new in business, which means ideally you would be starting to generate clients and revenue quickly. And when you're in that stage, I know everybody resists niching. They resist being too specific. They're afraid to turn people away. And the truth is, that's exactly when it benefits you most to niche and get really clear on if you were going to build your business and your offerings for just one kind of person with one kind of problem. Just play with it. What would that be? And niches don't have to be set in stone, but it's an amazing tool for breaking through the noise when you're brand new and you don't have a lot of word of mouth and you don't have a lot of even social proof or client successes. If somebody feels like you're speaking directly to them, then you'll break through all of the other businesses that are more broad or general. And so, that I just needed to kind of jump in on that, because I could kind of feel and hear people resisting that desire to choose an ideal client and really stick with it. Mm-hmm. But I have, so I'll share as well, because we're talking about how do you get clear on who you are? And I have a model that I'd like to share to kind of walk people through kind of the big questions you're answering when you are establishing your brand direction and your core messaging. And so I call it the substantial branding model. And essentially, if you look at those brands that have it going on, that are worth mentioning, they always kind of check the box in three main areas. So one, they know why they exist. So they have a purpose, they have a deeper meaning. So meaning is the first one. You have to have a reason for being. You have to feel emotionally connected to the work and stand for something. And this is a critical piece in every brand, because people demand more than just kind of transactional relationships with brands. They need to believe in what you believe in and know that you care about what they care about. And if that's kind of missing from how you're showing up, then you're at a disadvantage, because they're going to choose somebody who does care about what they care about. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first piece, is why does this business need to exist? One of the questions I love to answer is, why does the world need your industry? And so for health coaches, why does the world need health coaches? And you'll notice that I've made it general. I haven't asked you why the world needs you as a health coach. Just what is your opinion on why the world needs health coaches? And you'll start to unearth your vision and your purpose and what you really care about and see. And so that's the first piece, is like really getting in tune with why this business needs to exist, why you as a health coach are contributing to some greater good in the world. And that is going to create the depth to the brand. But then the next thing that you absolutely must have, and I like to say this is like, if you could only have one of these things, it would be this, is value. And so you're here to solve problems for people. And a lot of times, as we're kind of taking in business advice, branding advice, marketing advice, this is the thing that I find people lose sight of most easily, is the fact that if you're solving a problem that people know they have, you don't have to try so hard. People want their problems solved, especially, around health or around, like health is kind of the key to everything else they want in life. And so if you can stay really in tune to the transformation that people want and be able to articulate how you help them get that transformation, like what I like to say, this is like letting them know that you have what they want or need, then that is really core. That's the core to your message, to say, hey, here's the transformation I'm going to help you provide. And here is who I specifically help create that transformation for. So that's where your choice of your ideal client goes. And they need to go hand in hand. And then, and I also like to say, like, in that middle piece, in that value piece, don't worry about being different. This is so important, because if you're too preoccupied with that, you might forget to be relevant. And if you can be nothing else, be relevant to your clients. Make sure that you know what it is that they want and need, and that you're providing something that actually helps them, actually gets results. And then you'll be good. Like you can get a financially successful business that way. And from there, there's so much possibility. And then the third piece is originality. And that is where you finally answer that question about how you're different, or why to choose you to create that transformation. And the key to that piece is like your point of view as a brand. And so a lot of brands try to set themselves apart based on their personality. But what I say is it's your point of view that sets you apart. So what do you see differently about how that transformation happens? So for a health coach, supposing you help people get in shape or lose weight or, end emotional eating, that's the problem you're helping them solve. But what do you uniquely see about that journey, maybe based on your journey or your experience or your insights or studies, where you can say, hey, this is what people need to know about this, but that the rest of the industry isn't talking about. So having that unique stance or point of view on kind of the journey, and that point of view can even be broader. Like you could have a philosophy on life in general that kind of has you breaking through the noise with something new. And so those are the three pieces. And those are kind of the big questions or decisions that you would make in each area to make sure you have like a really solid brand foundation.
Gotcha. Now, how much of like branding itself, and I appreciate that you shared that process with us, like how much of the branding itself is stunted by like our own limiting beliefs in ourselves and the answer to those questions?
All of it. I love that you asked that, because yes, like you can't get a positive, like powerful outcome through this process if, when you look at yourself, you have a lot of kind of conditioning and fear and a sense of who you're supposed to be instead of who you are. And so like there's, like, I always like to say that as we're kind of on a growth journey, there's always a logistical path as well as a mindset path. And they both are absolutely like critical. And so what I just described was kind of the logistical path of here's the strategies we put in place and the questions we answer. But there's a simultaneous mindset path of, do you really believe these things about yourself? Can you really stand in your value? Are you willing to challenge yourself to grow into like these bigger shoes so that you can have a bigger impact? And so there's like a coaching aspect as well of helping people see the ways that they haven't been, painting an accurate picture of themselves or what they're capable of or the value of what they do in their own mind.
Mm-hmm. So, what are the common themes that you've seen as far as that mindset piece that health coaches are actually lacking at this point?
I think so health coaches specifically, let me think here.
I mean, it can actually, we can make a little bit broad and your other clients as well, because business is business. So at the end of the day, I'm sure we all suffer the same kind of little mindset traps that probably help derail some of our really loftier goals.
You're right. It's pretty universal for humans in general. But what I see the most often is like, it's all fear, first of all. Like, let's just name that. It's all based in fear of not being good enough or being rejected or failure. And so what the fear makes us do is really interesting. And so what I see people doing is really hedging their bets. I like to say that, like, let's stop hedging your bets. And you see people doing that because they have 10 different offerings, or they have 3 different audiences. They've got, so it's kind of like the people who are saying, I do this and I do this and I do this. And you can tell that they're adding because they think that they think that they need more in order for people to choose them. Mm-hmm. And so like underneath that is a fear that you're not enough, or that what you offer is not enough, and that there needs to be more and more. And of course, like when I help clients kind of turn that path around and double down on the one thing that they know creates the most like world-changing transformation for their clients, their business finally gets traction, or like often they've got a bit of traction, but they actually create a lot more ease for themselves because they don't have to be so many things to so many people anymore.
Mm-hmm. See, I think there's a resistance to that as well, just because I think that people get concerned about putting themselves in like this, quote unquote box, and they can't necessarily expand out of it. Can you talk about that a bit and how that's not the proper approach to look at it?
For sure. Yeah. And like, you're right, that is, I hear that all the time about, not wanting to be put in a box. And, a lot of entrepreneurs, I hear the word like multi-passionate a lot. Like they don't, and that makes sense. Like we, as entrepreneurs, we tend to be pretty creative and enjoy ideas and want to see our business as our creative outlet. And so the key thing I like to say, and this is why a brand is so important, is because there needs to be some things that anchor you, and it's more of an anchor than a box. And when you have that anchor, like, for example, so one of the anchors I have in my business is my promise of helping people build innately interesting brands that make them worth mentioning. And so that's not messaging. That is like a sacred promise that I'm making to myself, that I will never do anything that doesn't fall underneath that statement. And if there's a need for evolution, then I can look at it. But that is like an underpinning of how I would create offerings, how I would put messaging out into the world, topics that I would want to speak on. And so, and another similar one, like your purpose statement is another anchor. And so my purpose is to help people succeed as their authentic selves. And so again, like anything that doesn't like align with that has no place in my business. And so we need these things to anchor us that should be, coming from a place of who you truly are. And so you would never want to change them anyways. And if you have those things in place, then you can have some more flexibility to change other things. And so I don't know if I got a little off track there. But
No, I actually love the word, the rewording and rephrase, an anchor as opposed to a box, because it really is very, very appropriate for, basically put it in perspective that it is what it is. It's something that's a strong foundational piece, and then it can expand outward. So, I definitely feel that's a problem. And I've done actually something along the way as well. And being that we have this new information that you're providing us, and we're kind of looking at ourselves a little probably differently with our existing brand, or quote unquote brand, is like, what about the people who do hear this and say, oh man, I don't want to go through a rebrand? How do you get people past that? I've done it a couple of times. It's sometimes very, very necessary to do that. It's almost like you feel like a part of you is dying. I'll be honest with you, but can you give us the reason why sometimes it is the best thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I feel the desire to kind of define rebrand. And because the truth is, like, they're not all the same. Mm-hmm. And so I like to use the term brand evolution as well. Sometimes you need a full rebrand, but often what you really need is brand evolution. Mm. And the truth is, you're doing it anyways. Like, you're always doing it. If you are introducing a new offering, you're evolving your brand. If you're putting a campaign out in the world, if you're, serving clients, you're evolving your brand. And so in being intentional about evolving your brand is always worthwhile at every stage of your business. But when you the time for a full rebrand is actually not when things aren't going well. So the best time for a rebrand is actually when you've seen success and you feel either that because of the success, you've outgrown the way that you're showing up, like you've outgrown maybe the people that you're working with, or the way your offerings are put together, or the messages on that are out there on your website and things like that. So it's because of success that you're feeling that you've outgrown it. And you're in a position where you can feel the opportunity. It's like you're brimming with it, because you know that if you shift to where you're kind of doubling down on what's working best for you, and you could kind of let the rest fall behind, then you could really soar and also just enjoy your business a lot more and feel more proud of it. And so I think that's an important distinction, because I do get people reaching out to me thinking that they need to rebrand in order to solve the fact that they don't have enough clients, or that they are struggling with sales or something like that. And it can be a branding problem that will solve those things, but it will not be a rebrand that solves those things.
No, that is interesting. And I like the way that you reframe that as well, because I think that there is a big all or nothing misconception about certain things in businesses, especially when they don't work out as well as we imagined it would.
Yeah. Like, you always kind of want the most targeted solution when you're in that place, right? So it doesn't make sense to go back and do a 2-month deep dive into why you're in business, when really what you need to be doing is booking more coffee dates into your calendar.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. So when I was going through your website, you stated that you need to recognize what makes you completely incomparable as a service provider. I really like the way that was worded. I'm just clueless of how many health coaches can actually do that, because I always see, and I feel, me included, that we don't have the ability necessarily to separate ourselves that easily. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. The first that comes to mind for me is specificity, like especially for, a health coach. Like it's an industry that is growing and growing, and therefore it can feel like the crowd is growing and growing, and it can be harder to stand out. And so when you're in an industry like that, you can really use the power of specificity to your advantage. And that might be that you serve a very specific client, but it might also be that you own a specific pain or a specific sought out solution. And so, like, an example for a specific pain might be like that somebody's identified. Well, actually, you've got one, the sugar addiction. Mm-hmm. So that's like, okay, they've done enough. You're really targeting people who have done enough research that they've identified one thing as their biggest problem. And you're coming out and cutting through the noise with specificity to say, hey, this problem is my specialty.
Yeah.
And that's going to resonate with people, because anytime that something feels like it's like tailor made for their situation, they're going to choose that over something that's more generic. But the sought out solution is also really interesting, because sometimes people take it one step further and they get clear on what they think the solution is. And so, like, an example would be, I'm trying to like flirt with the idea of starting to get fit. and so I've done some of my like rudimentary research, like what kind of exercise is going to be good for me. And so I've landed on, I don't even know what it stands for, but the high interval something else with an I, and then training.
Yeah. Training, yep.
Yeah. Okay. And so, and I think it's really good. Like, I'm sharing this from a really like human perspective here, because you need to realize that this is exactly how your people think. Like, they're not right. experts, right? Like, they don't even know what things stand for. But so that's an example. Like, I landed on that, and like, I saw enough evidence that would be good for somebody like me. And then the next thing I know, I'm Googling that. And I'm finding people on YouTube who have specific classes and things on the HIIT. And so that can be another great way, is like, choose one of your, like a method or a tool that people are already like seeking out or excited about. Like, another example in the yoga space would be, yoga nidra is pretty big. And so, like, once people determine that that's the thing that's going to help their specific needs, then they're going to be Googling that specifically. And so specificity, like, a good question is often, would somebody be Googling this? And if the answer is yes, then you might have found something that's specific enough to help you cut through the noise. And I want to point out, like, these things are a little bit more transient in strategy. You don't have to stick to these forever. You want them to align with kind of those anchored, deeper strategies we were talking about earlier. Mm-hmm. But you can really use these to break through and get in front of people. And that is, the idea of niching, or being specific enough that people resonate with, like, they feel like you're speaking directly to them. And so that's the one piece. And then something that is a little more fundamental to the business and to the brand, and doesn't change as much, or doesn't change at all in some cases, is your brand. Like, what makes you incomparable is your unique approach, or how you've innovated on the norm. And so this goes right back to what I was saying about, you need to have a unique point of view on the transformation that you're providing. So if you're targeting women in their 40s looking to get fit for the first time, and that your promise is you're going to help them, like, do it within a reasonable amount of time, because you're targeting busy people or something, you might have some opinions on what would it take for a woman in her 40s to get fit, when she only has, 30 minutes 3 times a week or something like that. And then you start to let your opinions kind of get out, and your insights as an expert. And then when you suppose, you've got opinions on that, and the answer is that, it needs to be this combination, you design your approach or your methodology to align with what it is you see they need to get success. And you might build that into an actual methodology that you can teach to people so that they can understand what it takes to get results. But you'll also take that methodology and put it into your signature offerings so that your offerings are really different than what they've seen out there, because they're based on your thought leadership or what you see as being different or critical to the way that it's normally being done in your industry.
Oh, that's very, very, very good advice. I definitely think that a lot of us could take advantage of that, and I give you a lot of credit to being ambitious about hit training. And I know where you're coming from, because I think you're trying to cut out that time, because those are very, very intense workouts, and they don't take much time. Be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, when people, like, what I'll share is like, I like, because this is kind of going back to the importance of really just kind of being consistent and sticking to things. It's like when somebody's searching for something specific like that, if they come upon you and your online content is like a gold mine in that one topic, they're going to just kind of Netflix binge your content. Right.
Right.
And
right.
so, like, how often has that happened? Like that. I know that is how I find people all of the time, is I'm looking for something specific, and then I see they have lots of content on that topic. And the only way that you'll ever get to the point that you have lots of content on one topic is if you've been specific enough in defining your brand promise and the problem that you solve and how you solve that problem.
That's a great point. Yeah, because I think, again, to your point initially, this is why we do need to niche down and be clear on our messages and really kind of mirror our brands in that respect too, because that's just like the way the world operates now. And it's very clear. So I appreciate the way that you describe that, because I think it definitely resonates with me. So it makes I'm sure it's going to make a lot of sense to the audience as well.
Good.
All right. Well, listen, I promise you I'd only keep you for about a half hour. So we've past that point. So I want to give you an opportunity to just, share a little bit more about how we can keep up with all the great things you're doing, including your website, social media handles, etc., so that we can take advantage of, your program for substantial branding model. That's I think it's really, really important that we get that out the gate. So I would love for you to share that information now, and any parting advice that you might have for the audience.
Okay. Well, you can find me at realizeyourbrand.com. That's realize with a Z for any UK people out there. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Realize Your Brand. And then I invite anybody who feels, completely lost in this area to reach out and connect. And I, would love to invite you to an upcoming free workshop, or even just to take a quick look at your site if you want a bit of a quick gut hit. And my advice for people out there, like I'm gonna kind of answer a version of the question that I've heard you say before, which is like, what's the advice in the struggle? And what I want to share that I've learned is that the struggle is such an important part of the journey, because when we're struggling, there's a reason. There's a lesson that's trying to teach itself to us that is often a way that we're getting in our own way, or a way that we're sacrificing the wrong things, or a way that we're being somebody who we think we need to be, but we're not, things that we're resisting because of fear. And so those struggles are our greatest teachers as entrepreneurs, and they will, they'll keep coming back to us until we learn the lesson. But what I'll share is it's the lessons that I've learned in struggles like that have led to the biggest leaps and exponential growth once I've really internalized and faced the lessons within them. And so everybody's going to hate a struggle. Like there's just no way around that. But to kind of start to normalize the struggle and not think you've done anything wrong because you're there, and actually see it as an opportunity for really exciting things that are going to happen once you've really been with the struggle and learned the lesson within it.
No, that's a powerful message. I agree with you 1,000%. And, just hopefully that inspires a lot of people to just stay with it, because that's kind of the thing that, like you mentioned, if we get a little resistance, a little struggle, everyone wants to turn around. So you got to push through.
Yeah.
Oh, listen, Lisa, you've been fantastic. I appreciate all the shares and the wisdom that you provided us with today. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having me, Omar. This was great.
My pleasure. Take care. Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.